wind, water, fire, and earth. Elements of creation. Elements of destruction. These are the forces of nature's fury. Sydney, Australia, June 2016. This was a city under attack, a metropolis destined to become the capital of climate change down under. Australia's biggest city was in the firing line of a superstorm that would wake up the nation to the realities of weather in the 21st century. It sent waves the size of apartment blocks smashing into the city. Some tried to surf them. Others tried to survive them.
There was just total white right out to the horizon, and the noise was absolutely horrific.
By the time this mutant weather was done with Sydney, lives would be lost.
Your life basically destroyed in a matter of minutes.
A professional surfer is almost killed.
It could have been life or death that day.
And a suburb decimated.
A tsunami combined with an earthquake.
I mean, it's a beautiful thing, but it's also a very dangerous piece of work when it wants to be.
Winter in Sydney is often a time to take a break from the hot subtropical summers. Rarely does the climate hit the extremes of winter elsewhere on the planet. But in 2016, a combination of 3 different destructive forces were building off the coast. Wind, waves, and tide. For Professor Ian Turner, who studies the impacts of these superstorms, this was an event he hadn't seen before.
Well, the June 2016 storm was a large storm, but there were 2 features about it that made it particularly destructive. The first is that it came from an unusual direction. Most of our storms come more from the south, and this storm came from an unusual easterly direction. That really enabled the wave energy to come into the coast.
Unusual because an intense high-pressure weather system would push the storm right into the heart of Australia's busiest city.
And secondly, it just happened to coincide with king tides, which is our largest highest sea level of the year. And those 2 factors combined really made it the largest erosion event we've seen in 40 years.
Early June 2016, before the storm. And surfers are starting to gather at Cape Solander for a big wave surfing competition.
First time I ever surfed here, I felt that it was probably the most dangerous wave I'd ever surfed. This is probably one of the heaviest waves in the world for sure.
It's a place well known to professional big wave surfer Justin Orort.
I'm 46 years old, I'm a firefighter, father of 3 kids, husband, and I like surfing big waves.
But in 2016, Cape Solander was about to give Justin Orort a lesson in the power that is mutant nature. At the same time, just up the coast from Cape Solander at Colaroy on Sydney's northern beaches, Gary and Zaza Silk are enjoying life at their beachside home. Part of a multi-million-dollar row of castles built on sand.
On Friday, the first inkling I got of the storm was when one of the guys in the office said, "Aren't you worried about this weekend?" living on the coast. And then Saturday morning, it was absolutely fantastic. It was flat, calm, etc. Couldn't have been a nicer day.
Little did Gary know a fierce storm was brewing on the horizon. A face-off with nature's power was about to begin. And the families living in these beachside dream homes were about to enter a 3-day nightmare.
You know, it was Saturday afternoon, it started to get really rough. And then the dunes, which were at the end of the garden, started to get eaten into. And that was the first time we really realised that it was going to be a big one, big storm.
Surf lifesaver and Australia's United Nations Goodwill Ambassador for the Ocean, David McIntosh, is a veteran of Sydney's wild seas.
A lot of us look at the weather maps all the time. You could feel something was about to happen, but no one had any idea that it could be so devastating.
Collaroy Beach is a beach that we spend a lot of time investigating. It's actually one of the longest records, over 40 years of beach monitoring that's occurred. So we watched the weather forecast quite closely, and about a week before the storm event in June 2016, we started to see a storm was approaching. Wave heights forecast over 6 metres significant wave height, which means the biggest waves 10 metres high. But it was always indicating it was coming from this unusual direction from the east. So we started watching it very closely.
Back on Sydney's southern side, and Cape Solander was cranking out waves that have made the location a playground for all kinds of surfers from around the world, like Ricky Gilby and Nick Brabot.
The oceanic swell comes in pretty much undisturbed, sucks up onto that slab and unloads in a fashion that I've never really kind of experienced anywhere else. And it's kind of the intensity of the whole thing too, with the rocks being so close and the slab being so shallow and the barrel being so perfect. It's all just kind of comes together to make it a pretty special place.
Even on the small days, it can get pretty dangerous out here. But you also have to deal with the sharpest kind of barnacles as well. And just tried to get up and I just lost my footing and kind of fell on my back and it's just dragged me off the rock. You're always at mercy of the ocean, and as soon as you try to fight it, it'll let you know who's boss.
You could seriously get hurt and you could die.
But Justin had no idea he was about to be another victim of this merciless wave. Further up the Sydney coast, at the beachside suburb of Collaroy, the elements have begun their attack.
The rain was for about 2 or 3 days before. It interspersed, but we had a lot of rains. And that's important because what it meant was that the whole area around here, underneath, was waterlogged.
For Zaza Silk, the ocean surge was beginning to destroy the beachfront side of their house.
I was standing quite near the boundary, and a crack must have opened up where I'm standing now to where the bush is here. I was standing looking out to the sea, and there was this massive crack that appeared, and I just had to leap backwards before I was myself swept out to sea. So the whole thing happened really, really quickly. When the sea came in, bang.
As the intensity of the storm increased, more destructive forces came into play. King tides, savage winds, and huge swells on a coastline already vulnerable to extreme oceanic forces.
The east coast of Australia has a very narrow continental shelf, which means that we get into deep water quite quickly. So as waves, large storm waves are generated in the Pacific, there's very little interaction that occurs with the sea bottom before they slam into the coast. And so on a world scale, it's a high energy coastline with most of the energy from the Pacific just slamming straight into our coast.
Even the veterans of Sydney's beaches knew it was something out of the ordinary.
It created a situation, a cluster of events that you don't see very often, probably seen 5 times in the last 100 years. So it was very, very significant, very damaging.
The king tide had devoured the beach and was now attacking the homes closest to the shore.
The council guards were stood up underneath the balcony there, looking out to sea, watching the waves break, these huge waves coming in and breaking. And then one didn't break, it just kept coming in and it hit them. So it must have been like a freak wave and bang.
That swell event was definitely the most memorable one I've ever witnessed on the east coast of Australia.
At the same time as the suburb of Colaroy was being destroyed by king tides and crushing swells, down the coast on the southern side of Sydney at Cape Solander, the big wave surfing competition had begun.
So on that day where they had that Cape Fear contest, there was a lot of north in the swell, and I was watching it on TV thinking these guys are insane, because it was just heaving on the shallow reef. And on those kind of days, it's hard to even get out of the impact zone. So if you survive the wipeout, then you've got to try to get out of there as well. Like, it was just nuts.
I think it was June the 6th in 2016 when they ran the Cape Fear Red Bull contest. That was life or death. I was with some of the best big wave surfers in the world. Hey mate, there was fear amongst all of us. Everything in your mind saying don't go, don't go. The risk versus reward just really plays a big part. And when you pull back and don't go one, you always think, man, I could have made that.
I got to admit, it didn't exactly make me want to jump out here in conditions like that. As fun as it is, it's an adrenaline-based fun. So the danger is part of the fun, but the danger is real.
When you think about the waves that are crashing at Bondi or Cape Solander, it's amazing to think about the fact that those waves have traveled perhaps tens of thousands of kilometers across the ocean with almost no change. And they travel without change over enormous distances. In the 1950s, some American oceanographers performed an experiment where they tracked a wave generated by an Antarctic storm as it traveled in a great arc across the Pacific Ocean and crashed on the shores of the Arctic. Amazingly enough, they saw that there was very little change in the wave train over that period of time.
I've been pretty lucky out here, really. Like, the amount of times I've seen people had to get airlifted out or broken their necks, and like, you hear stories that of almost drownings, and I like to be as prepared as I can be. But you also, you're in the ocean, it's the boss. Sometimes you just got to let it do its thing and just hope that you make it out the other end.
The Superstorm was now launching 1,000-ton waves at professional surfers wanting to test their mettle against Mother Nature.
The size that day of the waves, like, just think of 20 Olympic swimming pools full of water just coming down on you.
And an elite team of rescue experts was there in the water. Like Ryan Whippet-Clark, a Bondi lifeguard with 20 years rescue experience.
This wave here at Salander, it's so dangerous just because of how close it breaks to the rocks. So if you fall off at the start of the wave, there's a good chance you're going to kind of get washed up onto that cliff face or bounce off it.
Dr. Shane Keating from the University of New South Wales is a mathematician who studies the basic forces of what makes waves and water such a dangerous dynamic.
In Cape Solander, some of the waves there are coming from all the way in Antarctica. They benefit from undersea canyons that funnel wave energy into a focused point, jacking the wave right up to very large amplitudes, as much as up to a 5-story building.
This storm was almost like the perfect storm. You had like king tides, the swell was big, we had winds, and literally like a few days out, we were still looking at the charts going, this thing's going to be ridiculous. If it stays like this, it's going to be something that no one's ever seen before, and it was.
Up at Colaroy on Sydney's north side, a beach that was normally as wide as a freeway was now submerged beneath a king tide storm surge.
There was people stood underneath the balcony on that apartment block behind me, and all of a sudden this wave just came that high and hit them and took them all out.
With no seawalls, a beach not prepared for giant swells and a king tide storm surge, Gary and Zaza's home had little protection from the force of the ocean.
We got gouged because what happens is that the water came shooting down the coast. It literally just came down the beach.
When environmental engineer Professor Ian Turner heard about this wild swell, he had to look beyond the weather map and see it with his own eyes.
So it's hard to picture that on a lovely warm day today and with the beach so wide that in 2016 this was such a different place. In fact, essentially all the sand had gone and had been moved offshore. The buildings that we can see to the north of us were being directly impacted by waves during the high tides.
For scientists, this extreme weather event was a sign of things to come.
Every second, about 30 billion litres of warm tropical water is brought down by the East Australian Current. That's 25 times more than all the rivers on Earth. So we're strongly affected by the East Australian Current, but the East Australian Current is changing. It's flowing further south and warming the waters off Tasmania, about 2 degrees Celsius over the last 60 years. And that's having a dramatic effect. The ocean is like a corner piece in the climate change jigsaw puzzle. We're trying to understand more about how the ocean affects the climate system and how climate change itself is affecting the ocean.
By now, the swell was at Gary and Zaza's back door, and it was destroying their house.
Sunday afternoon, they had 6-metre waves.
So the crashing, even though this is a really solid house, it almost felt like it was moving the house because of the crashing of the waves. You're not just safe in your little castle. You know, it is coming closer and closer throughout the day.
The only thing that actually was stopping the waves in that particular region of the beach was the houses. If the houses hadn't been there, in fact, the waves would have kept eating further landwards and potentially actually taken out the major road behind those homes.
Lifesavers from nearby Collaroy Surf Club stepped into the breach, and with volunteers from across the community, they put their lives on the line to build a wall of sandbags to stop the onslaught.
There were homes that were actually being undermined, and so the emergency services came and sandbagged to protect those properties in the short term, to protect them while the storm was actually occurring.
So the wave direction was coming straight in here, straight to the surf club.
The police were knocking on the door saying, get ready to evacuate.
Survival expert and Hollywood stuntwoman Kai Fano has some life-saving messages for those in harm's way.
In any natural disaster, the most important thing to do is stay calm. If you can have access to up-to-date news, make sure you listen to it and obey the authorities. They have years of experience, they have scientific equipment that we don't have access to, and they know what they're talking about. So if they tell you to evacuate, the most important thing is you do leave.
At Cape Solander, Justin Orport was about to catch the wave of his life.
The takeoff spot's just sort of here, if you're paddling in, just around where that one's breaking, maybe a touch further out. And behind that, you got super deep water.
And we'll see waves, you know, they're a couple of stories high. But they're breaking in 4 foot of water, 3 foot of water. So the size of the wave, it was, whilst terrifyingly high, it was the thickness and the power. Like, it'd be thousands of tons of water in every wave, just hitting this rock shelf. There would be waves out there that you could have driven a bus inside the barrel.
It wasn't a huge wave, on the takeoff, but I could see down the line it was one of the bigger ones of the day, and it just got me excited, and I just thought, I'm going to get so barreled on this thing. So I took off and I got down this wave. And I really can't remember exactly what happened, but the board got sucked up the face. And I went over, backwards. I remember just saying to myself, just submit to it, let it take you where it's going to take you, just hold your breath, you're going to be fine. And the wave went over me, and then I just did one more cycle. And as I did, I got pushed backwards, and my shoulder blades hit a rock. And it hit real hard.
Back at Colaroy on Sydney's northern beaches in Australia's most populated city, multi-million-dollar mansions were washing off the beach, and emergency responders and locals were scrambling.
When the swells hit the road, you could see the power, and you could see why the damage would be so great.
Well, the cops turned up and said, look, you may have to evacuate. And then all of a sudden, just in front of them, a whole load of the garden just went, and they all leapt backwards, as I did. And I just walked back into that house and said to the kids, I said, right, everyone start packing and budget for about 3 weeks.
The storm really struck overnight, and that coincided with the first high tide, and it was really then that the initial damage was revealed to all of us. It was a very unsettling and scary event for quite a lot of people. I was beside a building. We could actually hear some sounds, rumblings of the buildings, so the buildings were moving around.
This rumbling was a combination of swell and a king tide, a force described by meteorologist Grace Legg.
With tides, it's the variation that we see in our water levels due to the difference in gravity as the sun, earth and moon interact. So it's this pull of more gravity in some areas that pulls that water in and allows you to get those higher tides.
The ocean waves had now reached the properties of Gary, Zaza and their whole beachside community.
Well, it was hitting it on the full, effectively, and that's where the damage gets done. And that's the awesome power of the ocean.
So you could say the waves had to be 6 metres. They were just absolutely enormous.
So those largest waves were breaking at 10 metres of that order. That's of the order of the height of that blue building we can see behind us. That size wave breaking offshore.
So after each high tide, the low tide, you could see a huge amount of debris on the beach. You could see fishing boats, you could see massive logs, trees, you could see fridges.
The whole area was in turmoil because we've got the lake as well, and the garages were disappearing on that side. It was happening on both sides. The roads were disappearing under the water.
In the days leading up to the storm, we had a sense that this was going to be a large erosion event, but it wasn't until actually turned up at the beach and as the sun was rising and saw the damage that had occurred that it really could really appreciate what a large event it was. And with mixed feelings too. As a researcher who spent a lot of time studying coastal erosion, it was fascinating to see the event unfold. But at the same time, to see a number of, at that stage, private homeowners really being severely impacted was quite a significant both personal and professional event to witness.
Ex-military operative and risk management expert Joanna Harmdorf has worked in extreme and dangerous environments around the world. Her experience has taught her some clear guidelines for those caught in a storm surge situation.
So we advise that if you do get swept away by water, you get onto your back and you try to stay facing forward. Okay, this so you can see what's coming. If you get the chance to actually grab hold of a pole or what's left of a house or a tree, then that is your best chance of surviving. You won't fight the current, you won't win this.
Nighttime also brings added threat to any water emergency.
In any climate, at night it will cool down, and if you're wet and cold for a long period of time, then hypothermia is an actual threat. If you do get wet and you have to survive overnight, try to get out of the wind, so find a sheltered area. And if you are with someone, then body-to-body heat is the best way of staying warm. So get really nice and close and keep each other warm.
Because the largest tides were occurring at night, that was when we were seeing the most dramatic changes occur on the beach. And in fact, a building was starting to make some noise as it was shifting around. So it was quite a dramatic period of time for those directly involved in protecting the buildings for a couple of hours during each high tide.
So weather is random, like a game of chance. Climate is more like the casino. It sets the odds of how likely a particular weather event is going to happen. Climate change is shifting the odds in the casino. So we have much more likelihood of extreme events occurring than we did before.
You're feeling scared, you're feeling excitement about what's been going on around you. And there's also fear. For me, there was a whole load of different emotions that were going on during the storm. You know, where are we going to end up staying? How long are we going to be away for? Am I going to have a house when I wake up the next morning?
Yeah, where we're standing now, we definitely would have been during the storm. In fact, the sand we're standing on was washed away. The waves were impacting on the wall and, in fact, damaging the blue building we can see as each wave was rolling in and impacting the front of that building.
Where those waves are breaking now, those waves were breaking on these roller doors and, in fact, smashed them straight in. So the waves came right through here, brought sand through, brought water through. All the gear that was in here was absolutely tossed around.
So the sea managed to go over the top of that, went inside the building. The rain was so heavy that the roof caved in as well. So it's not just the sea that was coming in. They had the storm coming in above.
The neighbour a couple of doors up, Malcolm, he lost his pool, and that was the famous pool which went round the world.
Well, there was a swimming pool, so at low tide, you could actually see a fully formed swimming pool, concrete swimming pool, as one structure sitting on the beach.
The pool on the beach at Colaroy is an iconic image around the world. It really emphasised the vulnerability of building infrastructure on the active beach.
If you can just visualise as far as the horizon, it was just white froth all the way across the sea. It was totally surreal, and it was just incredibly noisy. It felt really, it was extraordinary.
This was no cliche. It was a dark and stormy night. But 6 months earlier, on the other side of Sydney, a different storm had already come whirling out of the Pacific with the city in its sights. And it would give the locals a taste of what was to come. 2015 in Sydney, and it's 9 days before Christmas. What seems like a quiet day at work is about to go seriously bad for the seaside suburb of Kurnell.
It's a beautiful sunny day in Kurnell today, which is nothing like the day the tornado hit, which was basically hell. Just apocalyptic storm that came through and basically destroyed everything in its path.
Andrew McGregor works at Sydney's desalination plant. Ironically, a source of fresh water for the city in times of emergency. But in 2015, it was in the firing line of an approaching tornado.
We were at work and we could see there was a storm coming and the sky was getting a bit darker, so we decided to go have a look to see if, we might get some hail or something like that, but we got a lot more.
This was the 2015 Kurnell tornado.
So the tornado came through the township just behind me here, across Botany Bay, along the eastern suburbs, affecting millions of people.
With winds travelling at the same speed as Formula One race cars, the tornado ripped onto the land from the water.
So where I was is just on the other side of these buildings here, filming that roofing coming off, floating through the air, basically straight past here. If I walked out further into the wind from where I was, it could have picked me up or thrown me across the car park there. It was pretty intense, the force of that wind. If any of those sheets came through the air and hit me, it could have cut me in half. It would have just sliced straight through. First, we just saw the trees, all the branches just being ripped off, and then pieces of sheet metal, this other debris just almost floating. The intensity, the ferocity of that wind was hopefully something we never have to experience again. The sound coming through the warehouse, the sound coming through the trees, it was like standing next to a plane on a tarmac.
As Andrew felt the force of Mother Nature's fury, the tornado was destroying Kurnell. Ripping through homes and businesses, office workers were fleeing for their lives.
Yeah, people were definitely afraid for their lives. There was a lot of danger.
Watch out, watch out, watch out!
You know, having your house cave in or having power lines come down on you, being hit by a tree branch or being hit by one of those sheets of metal.
For animal rescue worker Shane Hendricks, the tornado was looking deadly. Not only for him, but the rescue animals he loved and cared for.
Literally, we'd fostered hundreds of dogs when we were living at that house, but I love them probably more than anything else in my life. The day the storm hit, I was sitting at home. I got a phone call from my mum just saying to get all the animals inside. There's a really bad storm coming. I walked out to the lounge room and I looked in the backyard. I said, Mum, I've got to go, I've got to go. And just watched the storm come through the backyard. It literally it turned in the yard, picked everything up, and it just went up. I then ran into the bedroom with all the animals. The hail at that point was about the size of softballs, and the roof was just gone in slathers. I looked outside, out the front. The telegraph poles were down. There was 3 of them down out the front of my place. I had power lines all over my front yard and my cars. When the storm struck, it literally, you could have drawn a line down the centre of my house, and the left side was obliterated and the right side was completely untouched, which was super lucky because that's where we hid.
Back at the desalination plant, the tornado was in full effect.
Yes, people would have been very worried for their safety, for their lives. I don't think anyone in this area would have experienced anything like that before. There was a lot of both fear, excitement, a bit of pandemonium, lots of houses, a truck was blown over. In the distance, you could see what we thought was lightning strikes, but it was the power lines arcing on themselves, flashing and sparking constantly.
Coastal engineer James Carley from the University of New South Wales studies the mutant forces that smash into Australia's shores.
The Kurnell tornado, so tornadoes are a different weather phenomena to what we normally talk about low pressure systems. So they're operating on a very small scale. So nevertheless, it was extreme winds. So very small area tornado, only half a kilometre across, and it came through the Kurnell area, did massive amount of damage. I did see it not long after the tornado hit, and I noticed damage in a lot of buildings. A lot of fairly modern new structures were ripped apart and walls ripped off them. Noting, under being an engineer, under building codes, we don't actually design for tornadoes in Australia, so tornadoes are outside the design codes for buildings.
Yeah, devastating for everyone here, just to see your life basically destroyed in the matter of minutes.
Tornadoes, hurricanes and typhoons may all seem like similar weather events. But for Australian Bureau of Meteorology extreme weather specialist, Grace Legg, a tornado is a specific weather event not to be confused with a hurricane.
Tornadoes are small areas, a few kilometres to maybe tens of kilometres across they can be. Very small tracks, very hard to predict though because they're such a small area and they can dissipate and form quite quickly. Cyclones, on the other hand, tropical cyclones are large systems. They're hundreds of kilometres across.
It may have only been hitting a small area and lasted just minutes, but when the tornado was finished, an entire suburb had been thrashed. Shane's bravery saved those he cared for, but it's a painful memory.
I was lucky. I had the day off work. If I didn't have the day off work, I truly believe a lot of my pets would be dead. It was definitely a shake-up for the town, but I love Kurnell, and it was... Sorry. It was actually really nice to see everyone come together. Yeah, baby.
There you go.
That day, it's a day that I'll never forget. It's ingrained into my memory forever. It's something that's going to come up every year at that time of year. Everyone's going to remember the tornado that came through and what it did.
We were so incredibly lucky that no one died. You know, we were so incredibly lucky that all my animals and all the animals in my care were completely fine.
Survival expert Joanna Harmdorf has some clear messages for those faced with extreme events like tornadoes and hurricanes. Amazingly, it's a tip Shane Hendricks instinctively knew.
Find any shelter. If you're not in your house, anything. If you're outside, even in a ditch would be best, and stay low and wait till it blows over. But if you have the luxury of being in your house, go to the most inner room that you've got, because glass is going to be very dangerous if that comes flying in.
The Kurnell tornado was a freak event that lasted only a few hours. But 6 months later, when the Sydney Superstorm of 2016 hit, it hammered the city for 3 solid days. At Sydney's big wave location, Cape Solander, professional surfer Justin Orort has suffered the biggest wipeout of his life. And he was now fighting to survive. Surf lifeguard Ryan Whippet Clark and his team had only seconds to save Justin's life.
When you're sort of out here and it's big, my mental process is get me the hell out of here. Quick, get to the middle, get to the deep water, but you've just got to try and stay calm in that rescue environment.
Justin had taken off on a wave 3 stories high, and it had slammed him into a shallow rock ledge. Now he was underwater and about to lose consciousness.
I was concussed and I didn't even know. I just remember getting to the top and seeing Ryan Hipwood come in on the jet ski that he towed me in on. He was coming for me and then just jumps off it. And then he starts swimming for me and then another jet ski's coming and I'm like, what is going on here?
The whitewash was so big, I couldn't see what was happening behind it, but when he popped up, he was pretty much unconscious, kind of just wobbling in the water.
He grabs me and sort of pulls me in like a lifeguard would, and they take me out to a safety raft. And then I seen a bit of blood or something. Someone said, oh, you got a nasty cut on your head.
And he was worried about his shoulder without knowing that he had a hole in his head, that you could stick your fingers in.
I nearly wanted to cry straight away. I got emotional. I was like, oh, my 3 children, they were only young.
As soon as you're sort of out of the wave zone and into that safety of that channel, it then becomes a real serious situation, and it's spinal management, trying to stop the bleeding.
And there's no communication. I'm going, someone just ring my wife.
And it's hard, like, you're sitting there looking at a mate who, you know, realistically, 15, 20 seconds earlier could have hit himself any worse and he'd be dead.
Without the lifeguards, mate, I could have died.
It's an amazing story of survival, and it still brings emotion to the two men who experienced that life or death moment.
Hey,
Good, mate. What's happening?
Nah, no worries, mate. How you been?
I'm good, yeah.
Back to the scene of the crime, eh?
Yeah, thanks heaps, eh?
No worries,
Hey,
mate. No worries.
You and your boys just looked after me, so I'm that stoked. And
what we're here to do. But and when it's as big as that and scary as that, it puts it into perspective how dangerous this wave is. And
I just couldn't believe how professional you guys were. Without you guys, you know, we wouldn't be able to, like, do what we do.
Yeah.
Survival expert Kai Furneaux has a simple tip to survive in deadly surf and storm environments.
If you are caught in big surf, the key is to relax because it's going to depend on how much oxygen you can hold in your lungs. If you are fighting the surf, then you're burning up oxygen. But if you can relax and hold your breath and know that eventually you'll come to the surface of the water, then that's the most proactive thing you can do in big surf.
As Cape Solander's life and death surf competition was coming to an end, on Sydney's northern beaches, one small suburb was still being destroyed.
Was a war zone. You saw trucks bringing massive piles of sand in. You saw probably 300-400 people putting sand in sandbags.
Homes collapsing into the ocean as wave after wave struck.
There was a massive crack that appeared behind me. So when the sea came, it wasn't just nibbling, it was taking great chunks of the garden. And I just jumped back, and at that stage, you knew that, you know, you were in trouble. A tsunami combined with an earthquake. I know it sounds a bit of a weird description, but when the earth trembles and the cracks open up, but you've got the sea that has created that as well.
The wind, the surge, the giant swell. Few had ever seen the ocean attack with so much wrath. But in the past, Sydney has experienced freak storms, a warning of things to come.
There's been a number of severe storms that I've seen. I was around in 1974. That was a very dangerous severe storm.
In 1974, an extreme weather event, later dubbed the Cygnus Storm, hit Sydney, smashing buildings and destroying beaches.
I was about 11 years of age when the Cygnus Storm came through, and we saw damage and destruction all over the place, and that was one of the defining moments of my life.
1974, I remember it well, but the force of the 2016 storm was devastating.
The storm from 1974 was almost 50 years ago, but many scientists are seeing an increased frequency for these extreme events.
As the planet gets warmer, as we emit more greenhouse gases, as the atmosphere traps more heat, we're seeing an increased intensity and frequency of extreme events. They're here to stay, and they're going to get worse.
There were about 3 days when with every high tide we'd see another wave of damage occurring to the coast.
The ocean just took the sand away. That was the first thing it took. And then it decided to take everything else that it could find.
So during the storm, my mother's ashes were buried in the garden. Yeah, they were on the other side because my mother used to, she was disabled. And we built the ramp along the side of the house so that she could come here in her wheelchair and watch the sea. She used to love coming here. It didn't really sink in until a couple of days later going, oh, hold on, what's missing? What have we lost during this? So I think for me, that was probably the most precious thing for me that disappeared on that day.
The town of Collaroy was devastated, but it wouldn't break the community's spirit. Locals banded together to save what was left of their suburb.
The Australian spirit that we all talk about was evident in adversity.
After 3 days of struggle, pain and loss, the sea abated. The battle, for now, was over.
Absolutely, I think we have a false sense of security about Mother Nature. We can become quite complacent about what could happen, and it's not going to happen to me. And just be very respectful of Mother Nature and know that her power, when she hits hard.
The perfect storm, a combination of giant swells, king tides and ferocious winds, had left the city torn and, in places, destroyed. A storm no one who experienced its power would forget.
In the coming decades, sea level is rising. We're measuring it on the Sydney coast. Sea level is going to be that much higher. And it was a real precursor of we should start to plan for, or we are planning for, this type of event becoming more of a common occurrence.
In Southeast Australia, we're seeing much more volatile weather caused by climate change and other factors.
To actually see an erosion event of this magnitude, and probably the largest I'll ever see in my career, was quite an awesome experience.
We are going to have more extreme weather events, and that is going to impact our coastline substantially.
And it's likely the future we're all facing is only going to get worse when it comes to extreme weather.
As Australians, we're a uniquely coastal-focused nation. We cluster on the coast. 85% of Australia's population live on the coast, and that's only going to increase. We need to manage, adapt and accommodate these type of events becoming more common in future.
It's a nightmare scenario that if sea levels rise, these houses could experience the destruction of a storm surge and king tide permanently. A deluge that would make them uninhabitable.
When you have an event, for example, like in Colaroy in 2016, where a big storm is pushing lots of water onto shore, combined with a king tide, it can be catastrophic. In the future, we can expect a lot more of these events as sea level rise erases any room for error.
So certainly under a changing climate, we're seeing the risks to our communities mutate and change into the future. So the combination of increased population and urban development combined with a changing climate means that we're seeing more significant disaster risks into our future.